As I think about the issue of transgender women invading the world of female sports, I cannot express deeply enough my utter contempt for the cowardice demonstrated by school boards, city leaders, and politicians who refuse to make the necessary stand to protect both the integrity of women's sports and the physical health of the women involved. Apart from the fact that biologically born males who transition after puberty are taking records away from women who had worked very hard to achieve them, there are now more and more incidents of girls being seriously hurt by these trans players. Now, this was a game between KIPP Academy and the Collegiate Charter School of Lowell in Massachusetts. What you've just watched in this video was the incident involving only one of the three girls that were reportedly hurt by this trans player in the first half of the game. Because of these injuries, the Collegiate Charter School had to forfeit the game at halftime. Now, according to reports, this trans player is over 6 feet tall with facial hair. The average height of a high school girl basketball player is 5 feet 6 inches. And although I couldn't find an average weight of a girl high school basketball player, I can't imagine it to be more than 120 to 130 pounds. Hence, considering the trans player's height, not only does this person have on average a 6-inch height advantage over many of the girls, I would assume that he also holds a weight advantage of at least 50 to 70 pounds. Now, although nothing in the video shows that this trans player was maliciously trying to cause harm to the young girl, just the fact that he is bigger and stronger is why these young girls were hurt. You can see in the video the size advantage by how he towers over the other players in both height and size. Now, interestingly, according to the Independent Journal Review, last year, this team's record was 1 win with 19 losses. But this year, with a new coach and this trans player, they made the state tournament with a 10-7 record. So it's hard to deny that his presence hasn't had a huge positive effect for their team in competition against other all-female teams. When girls are having to compete with someone who holds such a profound physical advantage in height, weight, and natural strength, the reality is that these young girls cannot adequately protect themselves. In fact, because of the difference in those physical factors, these young girls who have to compete with transitioned biological males now become more prone to experiencing an increased level of injury, an increased potential to suffer a major injury that they would not have if they competed with opponents whose physical makeup was compatible with their own. The idea that our politicians on the left do not seem to care that more and more female athletes are getting seriously hurt by these trans players should be enough to cause us all to be legitimately concerned for the safety of our young women in sport. After all, what should it take for these moronic politicians to realize not just the disadvantages young girls regularly contend with now because of trans participation in women's sports, but with the real and increased danger of possibly being unnecessarily and seriously hurt in a way that under normal circumstances they just wouldn't be. As examples to support my point, we have seen the report of a young female volleyball player who was taken out for the season after being given a concussion from a hit taken to her head from a trans player. As a result, she is experiencing long-term concussion symptoms such as vision problems. We have seen the report of a female high school field hockey player that suffered quote-unquote significant facial and dental injuries that required hospitalization, resulting from the force of an accidental hit to the face she took by a trans player. It was reported that she was hysterically screaming on the field from pain because of the level of her injury. We have also seen the report of the large trans rugby player who has hurt multiple women during games by violently tackling them and by violently slamming them onto the ground with great force. And these are but a few examples of what is happening now in women's sports. Now, in reference to the dangers of trans participation in women's sports, A sports litigation article states this: in contact sports such as football, boxing, wrestling, and even basketball, there is a very real danger of serious and possibly permanent physical injuries to biological girls and women. And of course, this article does not mention other established incidents of documented serious injuries in sports like field hockey, MMA, soccer, volleyball, and rugby. All of this is clearly leading to a situation where some young girl is one day going to be killed. It has gotten to the point now that enough must simply be enough with this issue. How many girls must be seriously hurt before these political morons realize that someone could be dealt a life changing injury like paralysis, or even potentially lose their life because of their cowardice to make the right choice? We have all got to stand up and say enough to these city leaders and politicians who cling to such a level of stupidity in their refusal to admit that the safety of women and the integrity of women's sports are not being affected by biologically born men participating in them. Yet sadly, as what always seems to be the case with our moronic leadership, despite the continual warning signs of young girls being hurt by trans participation in women's sports, regardless of how many women in sports plead for their safety, these politicians will wait until someone is actually killed before they will be forced to make the choice to protect our young women. It is simply pathetic. However, let's place the blame where the blame lies, because the reality is that the majority of Americans want to protect the integrity of women's sports and to protect women in sport. But although the majority wants this, too many remain afraid to speak up about it. Too many will continue to cast their vote to elect these moronic officials who advocate for and allow these ridiculous circumstances to remain. Too many continue to buy products from companies that openly support the unfairness of this to women. So, in reality, this issue of young girls in sport having to face the increased potential of receiving a major injury remains a problem because we, as the people, as the majority, refuse to stop supporting those who are advocating for and passing legislation that permits this risk to exist. This reminds me again of a quote from one of the great thinkers of our time, Thomas Sowell, who said this: historians of the future will have a hard time figuring out how so many organized groups of strident jackasses succeeded in leading us around by the nose and morally intimidating the majority into silence. We, as the majority, have got to wake up to the realization of the harmful effects our unwillingness to stand creates. Albert Einstein was once also quoted to say, "The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything." Well, we all see the serious injuries that are happening to our young women in sports. We all see the hard earned records of women athletes being taken away by biologically born men. Our country is rapidly falling into the abyss of chaos because perceived social justice is overriding proven truth and fairness. What is wrong is replacing what is right. Criminals are being given more benefit than the victims, even though our laws speak against that. Justice and fairness for all is being replaced to benefit only what the few want. We must be willing to commit ourselves now to fighting for what is right while we still can, or else very soon we will discover that it is too late and the battle would have been lost. So, allow me to end with these thoughts. No one is saying that a biologically born male cannot choose to identify as a woman. No one is saying that America is attempting to take away anyone's legal right that is protected by our Constitution and Bill of Rights. All that is being said is that according to our Constitution and our laws, the rights of one person cannot threaten the liberties and safety of another. So, if as a biologically born male, you choose within your rights to be a trans person, then enjoy your freedom to do so. However, Understand that we all have to live with the limitations that befall us because of the choices we make in our life. Just because, in fairness to biologically born women, a trans person is not permitted to participate in women's sports, it does not mean that it is an injustice to the trans community. No different than if I was not an actor, yet then chose to identify myself as an Oscar worthy actor. If I am not permitted to have the lead role in a big budget film, it does not mean that I am the recipient of an injustice. It only means that if I want to identify myself as such, I must be willing to accept the reality that it is not fair for the producers to have to endure the probable risk of losing their investments. No one owes me anything just because I want it. No one is obligated to have to sacrifice their safety or the things that they have fairly and legitimately worked hard for just to accommodate my choices. So, if we want to protect the integrity of women's sports, if we want to support the environment for women to fairly benefit from their hard work and dedication to attain personal success within their sport, if we want to provide what our young women should be able to expect in the highest level of safety that is provided for them in sports, then we all have to stop being silent. We all have to stop buying products from these companies that are a big part of taking these things away from women. We all must stop voting for these politicians who are continuing to endorse this unfairness towards women in sports. And mostly, we must all be unending in our commitment to doing these things. We cannot just stop supporting these politicians and companies for a week or for a month. We have to make them aware that it's a one and done. They have to know that once they lose our support, then they lose it. Bud Light was the highest selling beer for decades. But because of the majority making a stand against what they were doing and supporting inappropriate online messaging towards kids, they dropped billions of dollars in share value. And even after a year, they are still 30% down in sales. In a country that is turning more and more left of what is right and fair, this is how we get back on track. This is how we get the integrity of women's sports and the safety of women in sport to be restored. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. And if you like this type of content, please take the time to share this video with others, as that will help me to grow my channel. I would also greatly appreciate it if you would hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because that will be a great help to me in continuing to put out this type of content. And hey, as always, I'd just like to say God bless you, and thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Until next time.